Morning, everyone. Let us now pay our respects to Mongkok. We will now formally request for Dhamma talk. If you're ready, please be in Ajahn. Kolkata. Brahma Chaloka Dipati Sahampati Tata Jaliya Diwara Ayajata Santi Dasatha Haraja Kajatika Ese Tudama Anuka Imam Pajam.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. One of the ways that Ajahn Chah, one of his teachers, Ajahn Mun, and some of the other forest Ajahns talk about the practice is that we're developing the qualities of the Eightfold Noble Path together in the one mind, and they all form a part of the whole. And they talk about them as being like parts of a circle or a wheel. So we have the traditional Buddhist symbol of the wheel of Dhamma. And you have the 8 spokes, which are the 8 factors of the Noble Path. And that you need to develop all of them until they're strong and arising in the mind together, as they support each other. And just like a wheel, if one of the spokes is weak or snapped, broken, then the whole wheel doesn't turn properly. And this is something that, as Buddhists, often gives rise to doubt or a lack of clarity, because, say, we do a meditation retreat, we're focusing a lot on a particular technique, such as the breath meditation or 4 foundations of mindfulness, vipassana, and so on. Sometimes we focus right in on a particular aspect of the practice or one of those spokes, one of those parts of the circle or the whole, even to the point where we may neglect other parts. But then, of course, it's sometimes another problem is it seems like there's so much to learn and remember, and you can't be mindful and remember everything at the same time, it seems. We know that the Buddha taught many, many teachings. Usually, they say 84,000 Dhamma teachings. So who can remember all of those 84,000 teachings? One way Ajahn Chah would help people through this kind of dilemma is encourage them to practice mindfulness and clear comprehension develop these qualities kind of at the center of the wheel or the center of the practice. It doesn't mean to say to neglect any other aspect, but to see the leading role these qualities have in our practice that link the mind and all the 8 factors of the path together. The people would say, well, how do you practice mindfulness? Our life is busy. We do many activities throughout our day. How can you maintain mindfulness? You can't always be mindful of the word Buddha or the breath because you have to think and decide things and do different things. So he would say, well, whenever you're aware that you've lost your mindfulness or you want to regain your mindfulness, just pause and ask yourself, what am I doing right now? And then answer yourself. You can even verbalize it. So what am I doing now? I am giving a Dhamma talk, or I'm listening to a Dhamma talk. I'm walking meditation, focusing my mind on my feet. I'm sitting meditation, focusing on the in and out breath. I'm talking to someone and I'm aware of listening to what they're saying or formulating the words that I want to say is part of the conversation. Or I'm eating my food and so on. You're learning to bring attention to the present moment and explain to yourself, whether verbally or just quickly, just sort of through observation, observing and knowing exactly what you're doing right now at this moment. Then you have sati and sampajanya. So the Buddha said they're like the chief minister in the government. The chief minister is the center. Nowadays we call it the prime minister. It's the center of the government, and they have to have awareness of all the other aspects of government, justice, finance, defense, foreign policy, education, etc. The chief minister is at the center, and then sometimes mindfulness has to be involved with one thing and then sometimes another. So sometimes you're with the breath, especially if you're sitting meditation, that might be the main area where you're practicing mindfulness by directing it to the breath. But at the other times, you may need to be mindful of walking, your posture, your activity, eating, bathing, talking, printing at a computer, whatever it may be. So you have to be able to adapt your mindfulness to different tasks, different postures, different activities. And that doesn't mean to say in the way of an agitated mind, constantly jumping from one object to another, one thing to another. But still, we have to learn how to bring out mindfulness in a whole range of activities, situations. Because life is unpredictable. We have different duties and responsibilities. And one nice thing about a retreat is you're setting aside many duties and responsibilities, at least temporarily, so you can focus on a more intense form of mindfulness practice. You maybe do a lot of samatha meditation, sitting, walking, and you may experience some deeper states of calm and samadhi than normal because you've set aside the other activities. But, the retreats come to an end. The meditation sessions come to an end, and you have to go off and maintain that mindfulness. And maybe it has to be mindfulness directed just to practicing right speech, because it's one part of the path. And we speak a lot in our life, and we listen a lot, we speak a lot. And often that's where our craving, desire comes out, our attachments are displayed in our speech. We cause ourselves and others suffering, sometimes misunderstandings, display moods. So mindfulness of speech and the practice of right speech is a huge part of our practice. And we can't neglect that. Mindfulness of action, the same. How aware are we of what we're doing? And sometimes we do things without realizing, we're just acting on autopilot. And sometimes you see that in a monastery, somebody has a fly or a mosquito land on their arm and they just hit it immediately, and then they realize, oh, I just killed a mosquito right in front of the monks. Poor mosquito. The mindfulness comes later. So right action is an area to develop mindfulness. Right speech, right thought is the one we're more concerned with when we're doing a meditation retreat, because we spend so much time with our thinking. And we get upset when we have too many angry thoughts or regrets or desires bothering us. But like the Prime Minister, your mindfulness, clear comprehension has to be ready to arise and do what's needed. It doesn't mean to say these are the only qualities we develop, but they're like at the center of the practice. And the Buddha talked about a person practice, sometimes he'd say that how mature is somebody's spiritual faculties, the 5 indriya. And sati is like, or mindfulness is at the center of those. So on one side there's saddha, faith and samadhi, and on another side is virya and panya. So saddha, faith, samadhi is calm or stillness, virya is energy, panya is wisdom and understanding. Mindfulness is in the middle of these 5 qualities, but they're all developing or maturing together. They come out of the one mind that is being trained, and these qualities are cultivating together, developing together, and support each other. And part of the role of mindfulness is to balance them. Sometimes we get lost, or we stray from the path, or we get lost in one thing or another. And so mindfulness has to be the voice or the intuitive awareness that comes up and says, hold on, something's going wrong, or something is no longer part of the path, what you're doing, saying, or thinking. So mindfulness is still there at the center, but we can use these other qualities or focus on developing these other qualities at the same time. As someone was saying earlier, how nowadays there's a danger with technology. We have computers and phones where we can spend all our day scrolling, and even if you're interested solely in Dhamma and you're scrolling Dhamma talks, Dhamma teachings, websites, YouTube for Dhamma, which sounds correct, sounds good, but we also need a refined mindfulness to be aware of how much we're just scrolling, whether the intention is simply for distraction, or are we scrolling with mindfulness, with purpose? And one of the aspects of clear comprehension is gives purpose to what we're doing. So you may be looking for a particular teacher or teaching, which can be good, but sometimes you're just scrolling because you've got nothing else better to do, and there's no real purpose to what you're doing. And we can get very distracted, lost, not very aware of ourselves, our mind, what we're doing, just scrolling, even scrolling Dhamma websites and Dhamma teachers. You notice sometimes when you listen to a talk on computer or phone, it's easy to get bored, turn off. Oh, heard enough of that, turn it off, move to something else. Another quality that also comes up with these 5 indriya is patience, endurance, learning to be patient with the mind that jumps and moves from desire to desire, even when listening to Dhamma. It can be developing patience with your body, just being able to sit still or stay with the aspect of listening or meditating. Patience with your mind that throws up a mood out of nowhere and become irritated or bored with a talk. So if we're scrolling, we just turn it off, move to something else. So sati sambhajanya, mindfulness, clear comprehension, is constantly engaged at the center of our practice. Whether we're talking, doing something, meditating, sitting, walking meditation, eating, going to bed at night, waking up in the morning, it's always there to be developed, to give us some purpose to what we're doing. And sometimes we have to be strong and ask ourselves, what am I doing right now? How conducive is this to developing the Eightfold Path for the end of suffering, or am I going completely in the wrong direction? Falling off the path into the ditch by the side of the path is one way. One teacher used to say, in Thailand, you have these paths between the fields, the rice paddies, and you walk on the path, but if you're not mindful, you'll slip down the side because they're often very narrow, and especially if it's wet and muddy, you can slip down the side into the muddy, wet field. And you'd say, if you're not mindful, it's so easy just to slip off the path into the wet mud. You start listening to a Dhamma talk and then you turn to watch your favorite soap opera or listen to some music or turn on the news or something. There's always something else we can do, and that's one of the dangers of the level of material comfort and development we have in the world now. Is that there's more choice, more distraction, more opportunity to absorb our attention in things that are not conducive to the path. So we have to keep coming back to developing mindfulness, asking the question, what am I doing now? Is this conducive to the practice? And this is one way you develop discipline, partly patience, partly mindfulness, and also some wisdom. That ability to reflect and review what you're doing. It's one of the practices we do maybe at the end of the day. You review how you've practiced through the day. What you said, what you did, how skillful was the speech, the action, how did you spend your time? Can you even remember how you spend your time from hour to hour through a day? Can you remember what you were saying in different conversations? How true it was, how wholesome, skillful it was, or how unskillful it was? And best of all is to be mindful as you speak, as you act, but that's not always possible. So at least get in the habit of reviewing things. Say at the end of the day, before you go to bed, review your day, how you practiced. At the beginning of the day, you can set your mind up again to practice the path as you go to work or study or spend your time. That's why we often begin the day by paying respects to the Buddha, reciting some reflections, do some meditation before we go out and do other things, because you're setting your mind up with mindfulness at that time. And we all know how easy it is for mindfulness to slip away, and we get lost into old habits of thinking, speaking, acting. Nevertheless, we have to try, don't we? We have to put effort into our practice. Another problem meditators face is the sort of the dullness experience, where you have put effort into calming your mind, setting aside other activities and duties, and you're just sitting and walking, and when you sit, the mind goes into a nice dull state, and we don't really know anything in that state, and it's pleasant. Sometimes numbness and dullness is pleasant compared to different kinds of stressful activity. That's where the mindfulness needs to balance samadhi and virya. The Buddha said when you're caught into dullness and you're not really knowing or furthering the path, not investigating the truth, the Dhamma, you need to arouse energy to pull the mind out of dullness. Even when you're feeling quite relaxed, you can still say that's a state of dullness. And we need to investigate. Investigation takes effort. It can be tiring, so sometimes we don't want to investigate the Dhamma. We can't be bothered, or we just can't face looking at things, understanding things. So of course our wisdom faculty, our understanding doesn't advance at that point. And we just go into the dullness or the numbness of the mind, the darkness of the mind. All these 5 faculties, sattha, panya, samadhi, virya, sati, they're all part of the same mind. And we don't have to go anywhere else to get them or find them, but we have to put effort into developing and then observing and using mindfulness to sometimes to balance them, sometimes to develop one over the other, depending what's necessary. Sometimes the faith faculty, sattha, is limited because we stray and we get caught up into some new technique or new teacher or new teaching that seems to be something that might solve our problems. And maybe it seems to be like that special teaching that will work for us to calm the mind down, give us some insight. So off we go. And then later we find it didn't really work. And we have to be able to reflect on the things we're applying in our practice, what we are learning, what we hear, what we're practicing. And sometimes people say all kinds of funny things. They say, oh, you don't need samadhi, you just need mindfulness, or you don't need to worry about sila, it will take care of itself. Just contemplate the impermanence of things and you'll see the real truth. All kinds of different opinions and views come into the practice. And in the short term, often they sound correct, sound good. But we also have to have that ability to review what we're doing and how it's actually affecting our mind. If the longer you practice, you realize, well, sila is important. You need to be able to practice restraint, moderation in your actions, your speech. Otherwise, we end up too confused, full of regrets, too mentally agitated. We see that when we meditate. If you practice meditation, if you have been caught into strong emotions, anger, lust, desire, and it's been coming out in your speech and actions, then when you come to meditate, it all comes up, doesn't it? It's very hard to establish mindfulness because we haven't been practicing mindfulness with our speech and our actions. So part of our practice is just learning to establish mindfulness throughout the day or re-establish it, whatever the situation. If you only see the practice as that time when you're sitting on your meditation cushion, then of course all the other times in your day you'll have this sense of just thinking, saying, doing anything without really reviewing or reflecting on whether it's wholesome or not, useful or not. Or some people think, well, you only practice when you're in the monastery or in a meditation retreat center. And then when you're at home, you don't practice. Or we have the excuses, oh, it's so hard to practice at home. It's too busy and too much happening and no one else is practicing. But you're still there when you're at home or at work in these places that maybe aren't that conducive to the practice, but still you're there. Your mind is aware. You're absorbing information through your senses, you're interacting with other people. So we also have to practice. Often we say in daily life when we're practicing, and it's hard to have the right conditions for the practice. At work, it's not like a meditation retreat. People say and do all kinds of things. They have different values, different standards of behavior. We have to rely on a lot of wisdom. Reflect on the Dhamma, and you maybe simply understand somebody else's behavior, which is not conducive to the Dhamma, not very peaceful, maybe it's harmful in some way. That's their behavior. It's not your behavior. And you have to be able to reflect like that. What other people say and do may be directly harmful to us or harmful to someone else around us. It's not pleasant, it's not nice to see or hear. But at the same time, you have to be able to reflect, this is their behavior, not mine. We can't always choose our companions in life, family members, work colleagues. Some of them are practicing the Dhamma, and many of them are not. So we also have to learn how to practice when we're with people who are not practicing. That's why the Buddha said, come back to developing a lot of patience, metta, but also just reflect on yourself, on your own karma, your own actions, and take responsibility for them, even if other people are not being very responsible or doing things that are very harmful, unskillful. You have to come back to yourself, don't you? Because that's the one thing you can be aware of and know and change. Very difficult to change other people. Like just now, I was at my kuti in the forest, and there's every day you see animals. There's a bird trying to kill a spider, and they'll have to go up on the eaves of the kuti where there's cobwebs, and they pull the spider down. The spider's trying to run away, and the bird is trying to catch it to eat it. Nothing you can do. So you just reflect, well, this is the karma of the bird and the spider. It's ugly, it's not nice, but it's just life, isn't it? That's going on all over the world, every moment of every day. People are hurting each other. Animals are hurting each other. You don't want it, you don't encourage it, but it happens. So what do? You have to withdraw to yourself and reflect on your own behavior. Do I still do that? You may not kill spiders, or maybe you do, I don't know. But do you still have anger? Can that anger come out in speech? Can it come out in your behavior when you're at work, when you're at home, when you lose your temper? How do you deal with that? This is also part of the practice. And often our defilements come out strongly when we think we're in a place where we're not practicing, so then it's like we're off guard. So probably most likely is at home, because even at work you're careful, aren't you? Because you don't want to lose your job, you don't want to get in trouble with anyone, so you're a bit more careful. The place we're most off guard is at home. So a lot of the most unwholesome human behavior happens in the home. Lots of good behavior happens in the home as well, because families often help each other and look after each other, but sometimes we're off guard and we get angry, jealous, we compete, competing roles in the family, comparing, get upset. So that would be a good place to start introducing mindfulness, in your daily life. Asking yourself, what am I doing right now with your cooking, cleaning, dressing, going about your business at home, fixing this, doing that, watching TV, watching the computer, typing something. What am I doing right now? And it can work. So many people have told me that they've been in a situation where they're just completely losing their awareness, becoming angry or upset or depressed. But then they remember the Dhamma. Something comes up. Maybe it's because they've practiced before, maybe because they've done a retreat like this. And then it comes up again, the mindfulness at the moment that helps them. It's like that couple that came here and they were doing meditation in the monastery, and then they're driving home along the highway, and already hadn't even reached home, already started arguing about something or other. And the anger comes up, and then they get so angry, don't want to talk to each other. And then it gets to the point where the man who was driving stops the car and opens the door and says, "That's it, I'm getting out of the car." Couldn't even stand being in the car because he's so angry. But he said as his foot touched the ground, it just brought back the memory of doing walking meditation. Mindfulness of a foot touching the ground, because he's done it before. And that brought back the sense of mindfulness, composure, the realization I'm just following an unwholesome train of mind and action here. So he stopped, and then he put his foot back in the car, shut the door, and he was calm. His partner saw that he was calm, so she became calm. And they could drive home safely, at ease. And this human mind is a conditioned thing, so we can condition it with what we call the mental defilements, rooted in greed, anger, delusion, sense of self, pride, conceit, arrogance, jealousy. Or we can condition it with the Dhamma, these 8 factors of the Noble Path, working together to condition the mind in a good way. And it's still conditioning you until you've reached the unconditioned of Nibbana. We're still in the conditioned realm, but you might as well use what the conditioned realm has to offer, which is the Dhamma, for your advantage. So if you practice mindfulness, particularly if you've practiced it regularly, you make the effort to meditate, listen to Dhamma, do retreats and so on, undertake to keep precepts, for example. Then at times when you need it, the Dhamma can come up and help you. At that moment when you're falling into an argument, losing your temper, something can come up in the mind to interrupt the flow of the conversation, the train of thought, and just make you mindful at that moment because you've done it before. Sometimes it's wisdom arises, just the insight into impermanence, and you realize something that's happened that was unpleasant or you didn't want to happen, but you have to accept it. And you just go, oh, that's life. And it arises and passes away. The anger comes up, but then it passes away. You let it go and you can move on. And that might be the fruit of previous meditation and insight you've developed. And the more you practice, the more you see how the Dhamma does condition itself. The more you keep precepts, practice mindfulness, reflect on the Dhamma. This is setting up the causes and conditions for you to keep precepts, reflect on the Dhamma, be mindful again. And it does get a little easier. It doesn't stop the unpredictability of life. So of course, you never know what's around the next corner. We don't know what our health will bring us, how long our good health will last. We have anxiety about our health, money matters, relationships, the people we love, all kinds of things that we get anxious about, worry about, get upset about, fear. And we don't know what's coming because we can't control the world. But more and more, if you practice the Dhamma, you come back to developing these 8 factors in your heart to protect the mind in the midst of all these different experiences. And you realize you're number one, maintain your mindfulness, whatever the situation. Because once you're mindful, then your wisdom faculty, your intelligence can work better. Once you're mindful, you can be more self-controlled, your speech, your actions. You know, the way of the ignorant mind, the mind that's conditioned by ignorance, going to craving, going to attachment, is always to try and control things, get rid of what we don't like, hold on to what we like. And we don't see the Dhamma when there's ignorance in the mind. We don't understand the Four Noble Truths. We don't see the impermanent nature of things. So we try and control and make everything go according to our desires. We get really frustrated and suffer a lot because of it. If there's one thing you learn from meditation, sitting, walking meditation, is that you can't control everything. You have to be at ease with whatever's coming your way and maintain your mindfulness and use wisdom to reflect on it. A lot of our Dhamma practice is like this. It's repetitive. We do it over and over again because gradually the conditioning nature of the Dhamma, rather than the defilements, means that some of that understanding, wisdom, mindfulness sticks. It's there all the time in your mind because you've developed it. Ajahn Chah used to say, the ripe mango comes from the green mango, which comes from the flower. A mango tree or an apple tree in Australia, we have apples. It starts as blossom, flower, then you get a tiny apple or a tiny mango, then a bigger one, and it's still hard, but then it gradually ripens, becomes soft, large, juicy. And the practice is just the same. If you keep conditioning the mind in the right way, then all these qualities are developing together. The mind ripens or matures so it can cope with the difficulties of life. No one can control the world to the point where they only get pleasant experiences, only have people speaking nicely to them, only have good health, pleasurable feelings coming up, always getting more and more pleasure and material wealth and so on, getting good reputation all the time. Nobody gets that. Even the most kind of powerful president or emperor or king, they can't control the world that much. They still have to face aging, sickness, people who don't like them, people opposed to them, people with different opinions to them, losing their wealth. Wealth goes up and down, reputation goes up and down. That's actually the way of, the ignorant mind assumes that having all those things will bring absolute happiness. But it can't, because they're impermanent. The mind of Dhamma, developing mindfulness, insight into impermanence, setting you up to see and understand and accept the way things are. To see through the mind of desire, ignorance, desire, attachment. Not to believe it, to question it, to be skeptical about your own desires and attachments. And some people, they think about this more and they say, oh, well, isn't the practice of Dhamma another attachment? You're attaching to the precepts, you're attaching to your meditation object, you're attaching to vipassana. Well, yes, you are in the beginning. You have no choice. You've got to attach to something because your mind is still a conditioned thing. It's only the arahants are completely unattached. So we can't just jump to this state of unattachment just like that. You have to attach in the beginning, but you attach to those things that will help you go beyond attachment. And you have to accept that. So we attach to Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, mindfulness, wisdom, these qualities to the practice and to repetitive practice. So even as we practice, well, because we are attaching, there'll be a little bit of delusion there. So sometimes we get bored with it, fed up with it, annoyed with ourselves, annoyed with the practice. Some people even get annoyed with the Buddha. Why did the Buddha teach this? Especially when you have to face difficult things like forgiving someone when you're angry, or renunciation when you just want to indulge. Then we start looking for someone to blame because our kilesas, our craving and attachment doesn't like it. When you have to forgive someone that you're angry with, we don't like it. Why do I have to forgive? So we may even blame the teacher or the Buddha, but we have to use the Dhamma that we are taught and that we have for our own benefit until we have cleaned the mind out from all this craving and attachment and delusion. So sometimes we do have to forgive when it's difficult. Sometimes we have to renounce when we know indulging and holding on is only for our harm or other people's harm. Sometimes we have to practice moderation and restraint. Sometimes we have to be mindful when the mind just wants to blank out, indulge in a fantasy. And sometimes mindfulness seems painful because you're having to give something up that you're used to, even though that thing is bad for you. That habit is bad for you. Mindfulness seems painful when you pull your mind back to the Dhamma, to the present moment, letting go of something that you would rather indulge in. Meditation can be painful, can't it? Sitting still for a while brings up pain, so you have to contemplate that, the attachment to the sense of self maybe that forms around pain, attachment to feelings that you would rather not have to experience. So I say in a monastery like this, sometimes it's too cold, too hot, too wet, boring, don't have enough distraction. So some of the experiences we have to be mindful of are unpleasant and painful. But that's not through the practice, or it's not created by the practice. It's just the practice reveals the truth to us, that life is a mixture of pleasure and pain, success and failure, good health, bad health, get money, lose money, people like you, people don't like you. Yeah, these are just the normal experiences of human existence. And when you're mindful, you can see that and accept that and let go. When we can't, then we keep following desire, hoping for that one bit of pleasure that will satisfy us and make the mind go quiet. And it never quite happens. Back to the mobile phone, you're scrolling again, trying to find something that interests you, holds your attention. Scroll, 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 end up spending a whole hour just scrolling, doing nothing. No more mindful than before, probably less mindful than before, more confused than before. So practicing the Dhamma is not always easy. It's challenging, and disciplining ourselves, letting go of things we're attached to and used to is not always easy. But we have to give it a go, patiently, with effort, bringing up the mindfulness. And hopefully we get some insight and understanding that sticks in the mind and guides us in the right direction, tells us this is the right way to go. This is the way the Buddha went, the Arahants went. But we have to prove that or find that out for ourselves through our practice. So I'll finish the talk there, but we still have some time left before the end of the session. So I'll end the talk and we can carry on meditating.
Antamayang Dhammakataya Sadhu Karang Tatamase Sadhu 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 Anumodam.
So we'll end the morning session there. Next session is a special live Q&A session at midday Melbourne time. We'll be back, and if you have any questions, you can ask them then. For now, we'll pay respects to Triple Gem.
Let's now pay respects to Long Po.